Leading a franchise, we have two entrepreneurs to share their insights. Coming up next on The Leadership Voice. Welcome to The Leadership Voice. I'm your host, Jay Barbuto. Today's show features entrepreneurs building and scaling their business franchise concepts. The Leadership Voice welcomes Sonny Nguyen, founder and CEO of 7 Leaves Cafe, and Thomas Pham, CEO and president of the Halal Guys, Southern California. We also have a special leadership lesson today being delivered by David Obstfeldt. So let's start things off with today's quote of the day. Today's quote comes from author and literature icon Mark Twain. The secret of getting ahead is getting started. The secret to getting started is breaking your complex, overwhelming tasks into small, manageable tasks, and then starting on the first one. Our first guest today on The Leadership Voice is Sonny Nguyen. Sonny Nguyen, a USC graduate, helped co-found a nonprofit organization with his brothers recognized as the Vietnamese Youth Foundation, which continues to operate in Orange County today. Professionally, Sonny has served in different roles in sales, executive management, and corporate finance at Bank of America for over 10 years. In 2011, Sonny, along with his brothers and friends, opened a small coffee and tea house named 7 Leaves Cafe in the heart of Little Saigon area. Their cool destination beverage concept has been described as an Asian Starbucks, or the in and out of refreshments. Today they have over 400 team members across 11 stores in Southern California, with 10 more on the way, expected to be opened by the end of 2019. 7 Leaves has been a vehicle for positive change in the local community. They offer free printing for anyone with financial struggles. They have created small community libraries within their cafes where anyone can donate books to share. They also conduct fundraising activities with local schools and nonprofit organizations. Sonny Nguyen is also active in the community with participation in many worthy causes that benefit the community for youth, families, medical, social, and educational causes. It is with great pleasure that we at The Leadership Voice welcome a great businessman and all-around great guy, Mr. Sonny Nguyen.
All right, thank you for the introduction. That was great.
Sonny, it's so much fanfare. We're so excited to have you on the show today. And I'd like to say welcome.
Well, it's truly an honor to be here and also to hang out and just kind of hear all those great things that you said about us and our family.
Well, you're doing some great things. And every time I go to a big event in the Little Saigon area, I always see Sonny Nguyen there representing 7 Leaves and making a difference in the community. So I think everyone is really proud of all the work you're doing.
Oh, thank you very much.
Now, Sonny, a lot of folks may not know where this 7 Leaves concept really began. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you and your family started the 7 Leaves Cafe.
All right, so I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. Yeah. There are 3 things that comes to mind when someone asks me that question. Number 1 is how we came up with 7 Leaves is, it started with travel. Number 2 is experience, and number 3 is family. Those are 3 elements that I can think of. Starting with travel, my brothers and their friends, they traveled around the Asian parts of the world, and they saw amazing drinks that were, in every culture, it really brought out the essence of that culture. Like in Japan, there was Japanese matcha, right? And in Taiwan,
that's my drink.
That's your drink. I know that's Jay's drink there. After a tennis match.
That's right.
And in Taiwan, there's jasmine milk tea, and in Vietnam, there's the Vietnamese coffee and the mung bean. So great drinks, and there's history and cultures within these drinks. And what they wanted to do, coming back and talking to the family, was that to share this experience that they had, but to bring in the Western world of service and design. And I think that's the essence in regards to the travel piece. But the second is with all the experiences that we've had with different businesses. A lot of folks don't know that we've actually had 4 different businesses that we tried before 7 Leaves, which failed, right? And when I use the word fail, just a trial and error. Sometimes it's through starting a business not the right time. We're ahead of our time, Number two is not understanding the business functionality, not having enough corporate experiences to really operate a business and scale. So the experience piece was another factor of how we got 7 Leaves. And third is we wanted to do something as a family. All right, so we all working in the corporate offices, we all had the same sense that we wanted to do something together. So by combining those 3 facets, 7 Leaves came about.
That's great. That's great. So as you started the 7 Leaves Cafe, you grew from 1 store to 2 stores to 3 stores. Now you have 11. Is that right?
That's correct.
So what were the big barriers that you had to overcome during the early stages of 7 Leaves?
All right, there were a lot. So it wasn't just all flowers, so I want to throw all that misconception out the door. But some that I can think of right off the bat was, number one is, we have, immediately there's 4 brothers, right? Mm-hmm. And there's 2 engineers, 1 software, 1 hardware. I was in the banking field, and my youngest brother graduated from law school with, so he had an attorney. Had no experience in coffee, tea, or making beverages, so there's no culinary expertise in the family. So that was one. How do you create amazing drinks, replicate it, and bring it to the market? I think that was one of the biggest challenges. So we had to all lock ourselves in a cave and just figure out from our perspective how to replicate. And also, our compass was, how do you make these drinks that will be mind-blowing? And for us, we had to have that, okay, this is a wow factor. After that, then we had to survey it with a bigger population sampling of our feedback. So after we came up with a limited menu, we brought all of our friends and family and did a survey. I remember doing that, and they're like, okay, they gave us feedback, and the drinks that didn't really have all that 10, the wow factor, we had to shrink it down. So okay, we had to make modifications, and through that experience, that was the beginning of overcoming creating these drinks without having really culinary expertise. Second, the second thing that comes to mind is we were wearing multiple hats. When we first opened our stores, when there were 7 of us,
right,
everyone had opinions about everything. You think that the individuals that were in banking and finance would really have all the say for our banking needs and our finance needs in real estate. And those that were in the legal would talk about and would actually have a say in those departments. But really, every facet of the business, we all gave our opinions. It took time for us to really calibrate to say, well, you need to do this, you need to do this, because we all had to care about everything we did. So we all gave feedback, but what direction do you take? So I think being able to overcome that was a big milestone and hurdle for us. And lastly, looking for expansion and growing 7 Leaves at the very beginning stages, that was difficult because when we had to describe to landowners, hey, we wanted to expand and go to their property, like, okay, who are you? We're 7 Leaves. Like, okay, what do you serve? Do you serve a latte, or are you like a Starbucks? We're like, no, we cook our drinks. So like, what do you mean you cook our drinks? So we had to explain, and then without having any concrete success that's already proven, a proven concept, it was very difficult to overcome that. So that was a very difficult time too. But and how we did that was we actually had to find locations where you didn't have your Starbucks. They're not your A-list properties, right? And we had to just find, okay, where would we strive? Where would we do well? And we had to find these locations. So that was very difficult. But after a few successful stores, now it's we're on our 11th store. It's much easier. Communities and city leaders are coming to us. So first 3 versus the last 3 stores, a world of a difference. And
so you actually had a lot of, in your family of brothers, you actually have a lot of talent among your brothers, but you had to figure out how to best use that talent.
That's right.
And one of the key lessons that you just described is this notion of making sure that everybody had their expertise. Sort of where you're delegating certain pieces of the business to each brother.
And that's absolutely right. And then within that, everyone would call it failures because we're doing a bunch of things how we started, but internally we just knew we were calibrating. Like this didn't work, we had to adjust, and that's why the first 3 years it was major adjustments until we got it just right.
Yes. And now growing the business has been quite a feat. Because in just 4 years, 5 years, you've grown from 1 store to now 11 stores.
Yeah.
And so what has been the biggest challenge to growth?
Biggest challenge now or at the very beginning?
Well, to get from 1 to 11. Okay. What's been the biggest challenge?
So getting to the 11th is actually much easier getting to the first 3 First 3 was just figuring it out and no one giving you a chance. So I think that was very difficult, and really knowing, creating processes and just having the system that just it flows right, even drinks too. But at the very beginning, we were listening to everyone, right? Customers. An example that I can think of is like we had this drink called the Black Halo, right? And there were raving fans, but there were a small population, and they're loud too. And even our teammates would love that drink. But we knew through data that this drink is not a drink that, compared to the other drinks, made economic and business sense. And we stuck it in there because every time we were going to communicate to the community that we're going to take this away, they were just loud and like, oh, no, you can't do that. I only go to 7-Eleven because of the Black Halo. When you look at concrete facts and data, that tells you what to do as a leader. So I think that a lot of times you have to remove the emotions, right? And whoever's giving you feedback, you have to have concrete data to make sound decisions. So I think that was one of the most important things that we've learned too.
What happened to the Black Halo then?
It's gone.
It's gone?
It's gone.
So people watching today, they could be actually, this could be a gripe for them still.
It might be, yes.
So during the process, you've had trials and errors, and you've talked about that. What has been the biggest business lesson that you've learned at 7-Eleven?
The best business lessons. Number one is you don't have to be an industry expert to get into a business. So those that are like, hey, we're so far behind. For us, none of us actually came from the culinary world. But to be able to not have that experience, I think that gave us the ability to be innovative. We didn't go and say, okay, what is Starbucks doing? Right? They're the industry leaders, and like, how do we basically improve upon their methodologies? When you're not in the industry, you basically can think, okay, how would we do it? With a little bit of ignorance, right, and being naive in a lot of things, that sparked creative processes that no one thought about. And I think that for us, an example is we cook some of our drinks, and nobody thinks about cooking drinks. That only came about just because we were thinking about inefficiencies and also about how do you improve quality, right? Because the industry standard is pumping, stirring, and shaking. That's how you formulate your drinks. But for us, we always thought, well, how do you go deeper and become, create drinks that are rich and will stand out? And we're thinking, well, there are folks, with different countries, they're cooking. And I think that's one of those things when we were traveling, we saw this, and like, this doesn't happen in the Western world. And a lot of that just started to connect. And that's because we didn't have experience or we didn't come from the world. So don't be afraid of, being so far behind, in an industry.
So as you think about 7-Eleven, I mean, there's a lot of great lessons here. There's a lot of great success, preliminary success. What are you most proud of when you think of 7-Eleven?
The things that we're most proud of is actually this. All of our family members, we had corporate experience. And there was one thing that we all had in common. We all felt that within corporations, they were missing one big element, and there was this culture of care. So I think because the essence of a corporation is about efficiency. And when we talk about efficiency, I think those are great for things. And for us, we felt that if we could do something together, that was one important piece to it. But the second is that we can embed a culture of care and really change the perception of corporation where you can actually treat each other as family and care for each other and then pass that on beyond just each other, but to your communities, the customers you're treating, and then also to your partners and the teammates that you work with. You can really make something special, and I think we're able to do that.
No, that's wonderful. I have one final question, and this is usually our viewers going to be their favorite question. 18% of all first-time startups actually succeed. So 82% of all first-time startups fail.
Yeah.
So if you were to meet a young franchisee, young entrepreneur that wanted to start a business, what advice would you give them that might increase their chances?
Well, I would say that don't be afraid of failure, right? Don't see, you're going to fail every single day. But the concept of failure to a lot is like, oh, if I failed at something, I'm going to do something else. Failure is more of a calibrating period, right? So when you do something, you notice, and you have to be honest with it, why is that not working? And find immediate solutions. And if they can think and they can see and accept failure for that, I think they're going to grow. Number two is When first off, when you're starting right after college, you're not going to know a lot, and that's okay, and you need to accept that. You're not going to experience, how it is to do certain things. If you don't have already a partner that has gone through that, I would recommend working and getting a lot of experience first. And I think that's for us, we had to fail in 4 different businesses and go through a corporate working experience in order to learn what we learned today. So for those that are trying to get into the corporate, or like opening up your own business, I think 2 things. Number 1 is, do you have a lot of experience with doing these things that you're getting into? Do you have a lot of passion, right, in what you do? And third, do you have partners that share the same values and they've gone through, some of these experiences you haven't gone through? And if you have those elements, it's going to really help.
So make sure you have congruent values with you and your team, and also don't treat success and failure as starting and ending points, but rather they're parts of the process.
That's correct.
Failure is only truly failure if you allow it to become failure. You have to learn from things, learn from mistakes.
That's right. That's right.
And Sonny, I'd like to thank you so much for being on The Leadership Voice today. Young entrepreneurs and young franchisees, I think, can learn a lot listening to your story and hearing your advice. So I'd like to thank you for being on the show.
No, I appreciate it.
We really appreciate it. And now it's time for a featured segment on The Leadership Voice. It's today's Did You Know? Today's Did You Know comes from International Franchise Association. In an examination of the demographics and backgrounds of franchise owners, it was reported that a whopping 1 in 7 franchisee owners are U.S. veterans. There are over 66,000 veteran-owned franchises that are generating $41 billion in gross domestic product and providing jobs for 815,000 Americans. So this means that while you may be supporting a local franchise business, there is a 1 in 7 chance that you are also supporting a veteran of our great nation. It's now time for our Leadership Countdown, where we give our viewers a useful list of key strategies or tips to guide your quest for excellence. Today's Leadership Countdown comes from Entrepreneur.com. We bring you 5 must-know tips for franchising your company. Number 1, have a clear core concept. As a business owner, you may be comfortable running on intuition. But as a franchisor, you'll want your franchisees to have a plan, your plan, in place for even the smallest of daily operations. Number 2, pick franchisees with care. Recruiting the right franchisees is one of the most important aspects of franchising your company. Don't recruit the first potential franchisee that initiates interest. As a franchisor, you must be aware of where the franchisee is getting their funding and what their repayment terms are. Lastly, a franchisee should be entrepreneurial-minded, but not so much that they cannot work within the franchisor's system. Number 3 is invest seriously in training. Solid training benefits both the franchisee and the franchisor. Most importantly, it minimizes errors that will result in the franchisor spending valuable time trying to correct those errors. This allows the franchisor staff to spend their time more productively. Lastly, solid training increases profitability. Number 4, keep tight controls. Control begins with the franchisor providing significant help in operating the business with a proven marketing plan. Beyond this initial start, it encompasses numerous aspects of the franchisee's operations: promotional campaigns, accounting practices, personnel policies, and being clear on hours of operation are just a few of the key issues. And number 5, key to running a successful franchise, is to systemize for emulation. Emulation, simply put, is when a second system duplicates the behaviors of the first. For optimal profitability, your franchisees should be duplicating your system as franchisor. And that, viewers, has been your Leadership Countdown, as we have shared 5 tips for successfully franchising your business. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
Well, we found here at Honda Center and the Anaheim Ducks that the Center for Leadership brings expertise in doing research, in doing training. The faculty that has come and given the training to our employees does all the research themselves. They're not pulling this information off the shelf. They're out there researching themselves, talking from firsthand experience, and it brings such a level of competency that we, again, don't find from other trainers that are on the market.
Well, simply put, is what really differentiates and distinguishes Fullerton and the Center for Leadership, really is your expertise. You guys are able to create customized content for our business based on true research.
The faculty from Cal State Fullerton, obviously they're professors of their field. They have deep knowledge and research, but also, aside from the theory, they really bring in some practical examples, and they bring in a lot of interactive activities.
The Bringing Learning to Work initiative is our way of meeting the needs of Orange County businesses and communities. When our clients ask the Center for Leadership to come to bring learning to work, the clients know that they're getting cutting-edge information, the latest thinking in the field, but they're also getting world-class training. Welcome back to The Leadership Voice. Our next guest today on The Leadership Voice is Thomas Pham. Thomas is the CEO for the Halal Guys franchise here in Southern California. With a background in entrepreneurship, finance, baking, strategy, marketing, technology, and sales. Born and raised in Silicon Valley, Thomas now resides in Orange County after graduating from the University of California, Irvine. He has been credited with advising small business enterprises with cash flow management, raising capital, improving banking, and general business planning as a business relationship manager at JP Morgan Chase Bank. He also started a thriving media and marketing company, Slick Media, that assists restaurant and retail owners with marketing via PR, social media, and other outreach initiatives. He also started a reputable sound, music, video, and lighting company, Prodigy Entertainment, that serves the concert, wedding, and corporate events industry in the past. Please welcome the man whose passion is as strong as his love for food, Mr. Thomas Pham.
Thanks for having me, Jay. Really appreciate that.
Tom,
what
thanks for being on. Oh, well, it was the best we could come up with. A short notice.
Yeah.
But we want to thank you so much for being on the show. Our viewers are going to love hearing about this serial entrepreneur who is single and still here and ready to make waves all over Orange County in a variety of ways. So maybe you could talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial pursuits, because you have touched on so many different areas in your young career.
Yeah, at UCI, and I talk about UCI because that's when I moved down here to Southern California. After graduating with biology and working in the hospital and doing all those cool things, I really wanted to explore other options before I really kind of said, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And so for me, I feel like I was kind of like, undecided, didn't know which major I wanted even after I graduated. So I went into finance and banking, and then I really went into marketing with Slick Media, which is what I truly love, and then now, of course, in the restaurant business. But failed at a lot of things along the way, and that's probably why the list is so long. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So which amongst your projects, because you've been in lighting and technology, audio visual, you've been in sound, you've also done work in marketing and PR, and now you're in the restaurant business, and you've also done other things in other areas of aspects of food. Which amongst your projects would you say you're most proud of?
I'd probably say working with Slick Media on the marketing side, and it goes hand in hand with the restaurant industry, right? You can't really open a restaurant and not have your marketing and be able to speak with people and know about technology. All those things go hand in hand now. So I'd say Slick Media is probably the main one, just because we've been able to really not only help our own brand grow, but many other brands across the country.
And with Slick Media, that company is designed to help restaurants sort of explode on the market, right? And to really build their local brand and build their following.
Right. There's definitely a lot of marketing companies out there that probably even specifically focus on restaurants and franchising. But ours is very niche because we're also restaurant owners, and we're pretty good at it. So when we go in and speak with a restaurant owner, we can give a lot of advice that really makes sense, and it's really from our own experience. And that's probably what separates Slick Media the most. And also we focus on growing brands rapidly.
So now we'll turn our attention to the Halal Guys. And this is probably your, not probably, this is certainly your newest and most exciting venture that is starting to really take off all over Southern California. Could you talk about how you first got turned on to the Halal Guys and how you became the area franchisee?
Yeah. You know, we went to New York City for the first time maybe, and I say we, my current partner and I now went to New York City maybe 6, 7 years ago, and we tried the food, and it was amazing. And we knew it was amazing because we had the food 3 times in 3 days, and you don't usually have that happen in New York City, where it's the center of all of the good food, right? So from there, we said, on the streets of New York City, we said, if we ever open a restaurant, we'll do it together, and we'll open the Halal Guys. 3 years later, we started knocking on their door, and then eventually we went out to New York City after we heard they were going to start to expand. We got in there early, we put a team together, and we pitched them to help us you know, grow their brand right here in Southern California. And they kind of was looking at us a little funky, like, you guys have never opened a restaurant before. Tell us a little bit more about it. But we said we can control the traffic, we can bring people into the restaurant, but we're very passionate about it. And after a lot more interviews, they finally granted us the permission to open in Southern California.
That's so exciting. Now, do you think that having Slick Media and the work that you've done with other restaurants, do you think that helped you earn the Southern California franchise?
Yeah, absolutely. We think that they, you know, they were really more of a small company at the time. They didn't really have a full-blown marketing division, and they saw that if we could have one of our partners here in Southern California really push forward on that and help us grow and speak about the brand intelligently in a different territory, 2,000 miles away, that it could be a really good partnership.
No, that's wonderful. And so, how many restaurants do you have now in Southern California, the Halal Guys?
The Halal Guys, we have 8 open. Our newest one was Tustin, and then we have one more coming for Rowland Heights this year.
Okay, and what would be your goal for Southern California?
I think we have room for a few more. We're looking at San Diego, we're looking at Inland Empire, but out here, I think in Orange County, LA, we have a good amount. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe somewhere in the teens.
Yeah, somewhere in the teens would be good, but who knows? We'll see. As the brand grows, it may change. Yeah.
It may. Okay. Well, we'll have to wait and see. So so you've been a startup. You've had startup companies. You've had some really successful, some not so successful, but you've had a lot of startups, and now you've also been a franchisee for an area. So how does being an area franchisee differ from being a startup?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a really great question. There's a big difference. I'd say one of them is when you're doing a startup, usually you're your own boss, right? You and your 3 best friends, or you and your partners are really your boss. When you do a franchisee, you're really looking at somebody that's already done this really, really well, and you're not necessarily working with them, but you're partnering up with something that really has all the processes set up already. Instead of, if you and I started a company together, we'd probably have to figure out everything in the nuts and bolts. If we join a franchise, usually they have a lot of those nuts and bolts figured out.
And you have to follow the rules.
You got to follow the rules. Yeah.
As a franchisee, there's sort of a system in place, and a system of making it, system of production, system of process, system of service, and you have to follow it. Whereas as an entrepreneur,
yeah, you can kind of make your own decisions on that, sometimes right, sometimes wrong. But what's really cool about the franchise is it's proven already. The processes do work. Yeah.
So you have to trust.
Yeah.
You have to trust.
Yes.
As a franchisee, it's important that you trust the franchisor's system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now we move to the part of the talk where we get into advice. And so if you were to talk to a person that was considering becoming a franchisee, what advice would you give a person that's thinking about becoming a franchisee?
I'd say
so that they succeed.
Yeah, there's so many franchises to choose from, and the one is you got to choose something you're really passionate about. Because if you're not passionate about it, you're not going to get through the obstacles and all the crazy stuff that's going to come, which will come, you know. And so I'd say, you know, pick the one that you're most passionate about, that you like, that you're willing to expand. It doesn't need to be the most popular one or the most profitable one. It really needs to be something that you really love and that you want to expand and grow for the next 5 to 10 years, right? So that would be the first one. The second is to probably build a team, because you're going to need a lot of help and a lot of support in the franchise world, because you're moving pretty fast. I don't think it's an endeavor for one person. Really have to handpick and choose the right team for it. Yeah.
Okay. And so then, what advice would you give to a young entrepreneur that wanted to start their own startup?
A couple things. I think, as a startup, maybe at the beginning, it's all about you and you're working hard day and night because you don't have employees and you don't really have a big team yet. But I think it's really important to understand that you're going to need a scale and grow rapidly, right? And with that, you were going to need to delegate and choose the right team members for it. So I always goes back to the saying, I say, let's say we were all living in an apartment together. It really only takes one person not to do the dishes for us to become enemies, right? Something very simple and small. So imagine running a business with 1,000 things going on. It just needs one or two small hiccups for partnerships not to work. So choosing the right team members to help expand that is number one, but also number two, being able to know what the next 1,000 steps are going to be before you go down them, and then recalibrating along the way.
Oh, that's great. Now, I would love for you to share perhaps the biggest lesson that you've learned in your early career, biggest lesson that you've learned about business ownership.
Yeah. You know what? There's two parts that I'd say. One is you always got to work really hard. I've always worked hard. I had multiple jobs for a really long time and trying to do big things, but working really hard is just really one part of it. It's a required part. The second one is to really ask a lot of questions, I think. I think it's important to not reinvent the wheel all the time. I think there's people that have done it. Let's just go get those answers so that we can continue moving forward and learn from other people's experiences as well, and to be humbling enough to go and ask those questions. I think that's really important.
So work hard and never stop learning.
Yeah,
never
that
stop
works.
learning.
Yeah,
be a lifelong learner, and so even successful entrepreneurs need to know that questions, learning, and surround yourself with people that have some experiences that can offer some insights. These are all great lessons. I want to thank you, Thomas, for being on the show today. Our viewers have been graced with some great advice and some great things to think about. You're going to stick around now for our questions and answers, which is coming up in our future segment today. So I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate that.
It's now time for the Leadership Voices Leadership Example. This leadership example comes from Franchise Business Review. Today we present you with 2017 Top Franchise Leaders in the U.S. Franchise Business Review analyzed 18 months worth of data, then approximately 30,000 franchisees representing 334 brands regarding their brands, leadership, and culture, as well as their overall satisfaction with their brands and their likelihood to recommend them to others. We bring you their top 20 top franchise leaders. Hear that? You know what that means. It's time for today's leadership lesson. Are you ready to learn? Albert Einstein once said, "If you can't explain it simply, then you don't understand it well enough." Every show we bring you, our viewers, an opportunity to learn from a faculty expert with a simple but useful 3-minute leadership lesson. Joining us today on The Leadership Voice is Dr. David Obstfeldt, Associate Professor at Cal State Fullerton, to talk to us about the challenges facing startups and young franchises.
Hi, I'm Professor David Obstfeldt, and here is today's leadership lesson, building young startups and franchises. At the end of the day, I want to emphasize a few things to keep in mind when you approach the challenge of leading an organization in its early stages. First, let me emphasize that there is actually a difference between a startup and a franchise. Startup is a very early stage organization where you, the entrepreneur, are building everything from scratch, including the idea for the business, the people who will build it, the product features, and the processes to create and promote that product. If you were starting a new concept restaurant involving, say, donuts, candy bars, and coffee, you would need to navigate key questions about the product idea, where to buy the ingredients, how to make the best donut and candy bars. It's likely you would do a lot of pivots or adjustments about what you were trying to create and a lot of experimentation of who you would partner with in terms of partners and suppliers. In engaging with a franchise, on the other hand, you are likely getting a script created by a company. Think McDonald's or Krispy Kreme, where many issues are already resolved. When you engage a franchise, you get a product, a brand, a logo, and an operating manual or a set of guidelines or routines to follow. But as we will see, the work is far from over. So leading a startup involves an entrepreneurial skill set. You need to be ready to continually experiment alone and with others about the ultimate goal of the company, its product, and how to produce it. You need to actively network to engage and enlist the people and ideas that further your path of exploration, and figure out how to combine diverse people and talents, which is actually a focus of my own research. And finally, you need to be a skillful communicator. The way you talk about your concept is crucial. One challenge will be creating the right combination of words that makes your idea pop for investors or collaborators. Another communication challenge is assessing the varying interests of different stakeholders, some who have you just met for the first time, and making the right translation and motivating them to join your effort. Now, leading a franchise involves more of a managerial skill set. Rather than creating a completely new product or feature, you need to review potential franchisees and franchises to see who offers the best startup package that aligns with your own interests. Once you select a franchise, you need to adapt to the territory you're given. If you operated a McDonald's in France, you would need to offer wine on your menu. And even though you were giving something like an operator's manual, you would need to learn to master and adapt those procedures for your organization. The networking you do on behalf of a franchise will involve learning from other franchisees about their best practices and from the community in which you operate. And finally, while communication will always be important, your brand will be defined and you will need to refine, not create, the franchise's message and see how you can spread it as broadly as possible in your local location. In short, there is a lot more invention, experimentation, and twists and turns in an early stage startup. You need to determine which of these environments is a better fit for you. The right decision can mean avoiding a lot of pain from a bad decision and instead an enormous amount of fun and profit. I'm Professor David Obstfeldt, and this has been your leadership lesson.
Thank you, Professor Obstfeldt, for sharing your insights around startups and young franchises. It's now time for the Leadership Voices Q&A. Do you need some leadership advice? Well, you've come to the right place. Every show, we take questions from you, our viewers, and answer them right here on the show. Today we have 4 questions, so thank you to Sonny Nguyen and Thomas Pham for helping us today. So let's get to our Q&A. Our first question is actually for Sonny. And this is no typo, this is from Sonny from Artesia, California. Sonny writes, I work at a franchise and I want to become the branch manager, but I don't think the owner really notices me. What advice would you have for someone like me that wants to become a manager?
Well, first off, I think he has a great name. Second, I think the first thing, if you want to be noticed, we have 11 stores, and we welcome all of our teammates to be able to reach out with open door policy. But before you reach out to the owners or the manager, make sure you have a game plan and also know exactly what it is that you're trying to achieve. If it's being noticed, that's one thing, but if you want to be a manager, write down what are the areas you think your strengths are and where you can work on. So that's kind of like from your perspective. The second perspective is, what do you think they think of you? And when you do approach them, see if that actually matches and be prepared for their feedback, and their feedback probably won't match yours, and then being able to be honestly work with them in calibrating those things. So that open mind communication is very important, but be well thought out and be prepared to just listen for their feedback in a way where you don't get emotional about it. What you want to do is you want to take that in and say, okay, now based on what you're saying, what are some of the things we can do to improve this, and time frame wise now, within what time frame, if I can achieve these things, what are my next steps? And I think that starts the process, because for us, we always want to see someone that has that proactiveness, that passion, and they want to learn and grow, and they have a passion for our business as well. And if they're able to have that courage to reach out to us, we definitely want to be encouraged to now spend time and coach them. So that's my feedback for Sonny.
That's great.
I'd say, you mentioned passion. That's a really big thing, because, when we're looking for employees, we're not looking for somebody that knows how to cook already necessarily, or knows how to serve food. We're really looking for someone that has passion for hospitality, passion for working in the restaurant. We can train you to cook and scoop rice, but what can you bring as a table with your personality and your passion for being there? So I think that is a really big part. So letting the business owner know why you want to be there, why it's so important to you. Yeah, that's a really big one.
Okay, that's great advice. So our second question is for Thomas Pham, and it comes from Preeti from Laguna Hills, California. Preeti asks, I would love to start my own business, but not really sure how to get started. after I have an idea, what do you see as the most crucial steps for success?
I'd say the advice I have is, and I live by this too, I don't think there's anything you can't learn in 4 months. It's kind of this number I came up with. If you want to learn the piano in 4 months, you could do it. If you wanted to learn how to start a company or build a mobile app, you could do it in probably 4 months. So I would say is if you're committed to whatever it is, this business that you want to start mapping out what the next 1,000 steps are, literally 1,000, not 100, not 50 steps, 1,000 steps that are actionable that you can do. If you don't know what the steps are, to do the research and Google and YouTube and ask people that have done it before, create the 1,000 step and then just slowly go from there and then recalibrate that as you go along. But if you don't have the steps, you're kind of going in blindly, you don't have a timeline, and you don't know what's next. Yeah.
Terrific.
And I would completely agree with Thomas on that one. Having a good plan. Passion kind of stands out. I think about that. Like I would evaluate to see, okay, I got this great idea. I want to get into it, but could I see myself doing this for a very long time? And do I come in, energized, just thinking about this business? I think passion has a lot to it. That's kind of my first test. And then gathering teammates. In any business, I think there's this false perception that everyone does things alone, and there's that lone hero. Try to find, we're social beings, and I think that doing things together is very important. Finding partners that are like-minded individuals, so that they share that passion of yours. So you're on an adventure. So do that as well.
No, that's terrific. That's terrific. Yeah. So our third question is for Sonny Nguyen, and it comes from Quentin in Los Angeles, California. Quentin asks, there are hundreds of boba and tea shops in Southern California, but 7 Leaves Cafe is the only one that almost always has a line out the door. What do you think makes your cafe so much better than all the other ones?
I think what we do is we don't focus on how do we be number one, or how do we make a lot of money, or how do we basically have customers line out the door. I don't think that's what we focus on. What we focus on is how do we serve our community, and how do we serve something that's very unique and different, that is a need, and how do we improve on that every single day? And I think if you start with those questions, the rest comes. And I think so, being able to open up your own business or service, being able to think in a certain way where you're really serving a need that exists and improving on what exists. I think being able to do that really helps us.
Terrific.
For 7 Leaves, I think a lot of brands is keeping the quality. So at 7 Leaves, when you go there, as a consumer what you're going to get and what to expect. It's not confusing. I'm not going to get something that's messed up, or I have a fear that they're not going to get my order right. It's going to be right. I'm going to know what I'm going to get. I know what I'm paying for it. And that helps the consumer quite a bit. But when you walk into a place that's really confusing, it's tough to make a decision on what's going on, and then all of a sudden you're confused, and then you're not happy. So the expectation of the consumer and expectation of what's going on is not the same, right?
That's great. That's great. Yeah. So our final question is for Thomas Pham, and it comes from Quinn in Westminster, California. Quinn asks, what do you think are the most important traits of a successful startup entrepreneur?
I guess there's probably so many answers. We've talked about this for a long time. I still go back to one, you got to be hardworking. You got to have the discipline. If you're not willing to put in 16 hours a day, you're probably not going to make it. People try with all their might every single day to be at the top and work harder than anyone else, and they're still rolling the dice. So if you don't do it, you're probably going to really have a hard time winning. That would be the first one. The second is learning to do things that you don't want to do. Sometimes, I have my clothes laying on the ground in my bedroom. I stare at it and I say, well, I'll do it later. And it's there for like a month, right? How do you use that part of your brain that says, I don't want to do it, but I should do, and I should just get up and do it now? If you can exercise that more and more often, then it'll get easier. That's a really big part of it, because I think running a business, as much as people see the glamour, they don't see the crazy stuff behind the scenes. And that stuff really requires you to do stuff that you don't want to do, and you got to be able to do it. Yeah.
Terrific.
I think I'm going to echo a lot of things that Thomas has expressed as well. Starting with the work ethics, but I think that's in parallel with passion. If you're passionate, if you're doing something, and how can you tell if you're on the right track? Do you sleep and you dream about something, or you dream about what you're doing? when you want to take a break and you just want to relax, or things that you do as a hobby and you're still thinking about those things that you're on. I think you're on to now that passion, and that also equates to hard work, because what's happening is that you're living and breathing what you're doing. So I think that's so important. The second part, that Thomas mentioned is about growth. I think being able to be uncomfortable and getting used to that. Just like when you work out, you don't become stronger without this uncomfortable muscle growth, right? After you work out, there's a soreness that comes in. You don't get used to that soreness, you're not going to grow. And I think within business, that's the same. Being able to learn and experience new things, there is the initial feeling that you get is uncomfort. It's like, okay, this is so different, and how does this really work? And I think that's where you're starting to learn, right? And I think the third piece is when you work with people. You're in the people business, so when you're serving customers, that's there, or you're working with teammates, you need to understand that this concept of trust and respect, and how do you work with each other, trusting the community, trusting the customers, and they have to trust you too. So your credibility is so important. Harness that and really embrace that as well.
Oh, that's terrific. Yeah. I want to thank you guys both for being on the show today, and also for sticking around, for helping us with the Q&A. Thank you to our two guests for providing the answers to today's questions. Both Sonny Nguyen and Thomas Pham, you've both given our viewers some great advice to guide their entrepreneurial and career success. If you have a question or need advice, having leadership challenges at work, and need some expertise and insights, send us your questions right here to the Leadership Voice by email, leadershipvoice@fullerton.edu, or contact us by Twitter @CSUF_leadership. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today's show. Today we explored leading in young, growing franchises. Thank you to Sonny Nguyen at 7 Leaves Tea and Thomas Pham from the Halal Guys. Thank you also to our special faculty guest, Professor David Obstfeldt, for delivering today's leadership lesson. Join us each episode of the Leadership Voice, as we'll have 2 more executive guests, another special leadership lesson, and lots more worth tuning in to see. I'm Jay Barbuto, and on behalf of the Center for Leadership in Mahalo College of Business and Economics, we'll see you next time right here on the Leadership Voice.